Ich sagte, dideli-dideli-dideli-dü. Jetzt geht's los. Untertitel. Joey Alexander ausmachen. Und GPT-3.
What are your thoughts about GPT-3 and language models trained with self-supervised learning? It came out quite a bit ago, but I wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah. In the 90s, I was in New Zealand, and I had an amazing professor, Ian Witten, who realized I was bored in class and put me in his lab, and he gave me the task to discover grammatical structure in an unknown language. And the unknown language that I picked was English, because it was the easiest one to find corpus for or construct one. And he gave me the largest computer at the whole university. It had 2 gigabytes of RAM, which was amazing. And I wrote everything in C with some in-memory compression to do statistics over the language. And I first would create a dictionary of all the words, which basically tokenizes everything and compresses things so that I don't need to store the whole word, but just a code for every word. And then I was taking this all apart in sentences, and I was trying to find all the relationships between all the words in the sentences and do statistics over them. And,
okay, also er hat sich sozusagen eine komplette Datenbank von Texten reingezogen und für jedes Wort ein Symbol quasi vergeben. No, eine kompakte Schreibweise sozusagen, damit er nicht die ganzen Buchstaben einzeln abspeichern muss, einfach um ein bisschen mehr Platz zu haben, weil er musste noch, das ist noch aus einer Zeit, wo die Leute noch nicht so lazy sein konnten, weil es noch nicht genug Speicher gab für die Programme. Die Musik eben, das war Joey Alexander, das eine Soloalbum von so einem Live-Konzert.
That proved to be impossible because the complexity is just too large. So if you want to discover the relationship between an article and a noun and there are 3 adjectives in between.
Ja, und dann hat er Statistiken über diesen Textkorpus gemacht. Ne? Also hat versucht, Korrelationen zu finden, die zwischen Worten auftauchen, öfter. Und die stärksten Korrelationen dann sozusagen aus denen was zu schlussfolgern, zum Beispiel.
You cannot do n-gram statistics and look at all the possibilities that can exist. Yeah. At least not with the resources that we had back then. So I realized I need to make some statistics over what I need to make statistics over. So I wrote something that was pretty much a hack.
Ja, und weil es einfach zu viele Korrelationen in Sprache gibt, musste er herausfinden, welche von den Korrelationen jetzt besonders wichtig waren und welche nicht so ganz so wichtig waren.
That did this for at least first order relationships. And I came up with some kind of mutual information graph that was indeed discovering something that looks exactly like the grammatical structure of the sentence, just by trying to encode the sentence in such a way that the words would be written in the optimal order inside of the model. And what I also found is that if we would be able to increase the resolution of that and not just use this model to reproduce grammatically correct sentences, we would also be able to correct stylistically correct sentences by just having more bits in these relationships. And if we wanted to have meaning, we would have to go much higher order.
Ne, also mit Order meint er sozusagen, wenn man jetzt, sagen wir mal, rausfindet, das ist durch die Statistik findet man raus, Substantive haben Artikel und in den Satz gehört immer ein Verb, ne? Dann ist das sozusagen First Order. Das sind Sachen, die man dann relativ schnell kriegt, wenn man die ganzen Statistiken betreibt über gültige Sätze. Aber wenn man jetzt noch mehr will, zum Beispiel Worte, die oft auf eine bestimmte Art und Weise miteinander zu tun haben, dann müsste man höhere Ordnung Statistik machen. Also sozusagen, wenn man Wortkombinationen, die Korrelationen von bestimmten Wortkombinationen gegeneinander festmachen kann, die Korrelationen. Dann hat man höhere Ordnung Korrelationen festgestellt.
And I didn't know how to make higher order models back then without spending way more years in research on how to make the statistics over what we need to make statistics over. And this thing that we cannot look at the relationships between all the bits in your input is being solved in different domains in different ways. So in computer graphics, the computer vision standard method for many years now is convolutional neural networks. Convolutional neural networks are hierarchies of filters that exploit the fact that neighboring pixels in images are usually semantically related and distant pixels in images are usually not semantically related. So you can just by grouping the
Ja, weil in Bildern ist es ja typischerweise so, dass benachbarte Pixel eher was miteinander zu tun haben und nicht benachbarte Pixel, die weit auseinander entfernt sind, können sich beliebig krass unterscheiden, wenn man sich eine große Datenbank von Bildern anguckt. Ne? Also Katzenköpfe zum Beispiel, da wird man eine Korrelation feststellen, dass die immer eine ähnliche Struktur haben in einem Bild, aber was im Hintergrund ist, zum Beispiel kann sehr stark variieren und hat mit dem Katzenkopf erstmal nichts zu tun, so nach dem Motto.
pixels that are next to each other hierarchically together reconstruct the shape of objects. And this is an important prior that we build into
Ja,
these
und
models. So
wenn
they
ihr
can
mal in eurem Leben was mit Mathematik zu tun hattet, dann wisst ihr auch, was eine Faltung ist. Und so ein Faltungsintegral, wenn man sich das numerisch mal anguckt, was das macht, dann stellt man fest, dass man damit super gut zum Beispiel Ableitungen hinschreiben kann, numerisch. Sodass man aus Filtern sowohl Kantenerkennung als auch Flächenerkennung durch Faltung abbilden kann. Und das ist the key, glaube ich, gewesen bei den Convolutional Neuronal Networks, weil die eigentlich alles darauf abbilden, dass man aus Bildern mit Faltung alles rauslutschen kann, was in dem Bild an Content drin ist.
converge quickly. But this doesn't work in language for the reason that adjacent words are often but not always related and distant words are sometimes related while the words in between are not. Right? So how can you learn the topology of language? And I think for this reason that this difficulty exists, that the transformer was invented in natural language processing, not in vision. And what the transformer is doing, it's a
Wobei man den Transformer auch super benutzen kann in Vision. Ne? Also Transformer ist das mit der Attention. Das ist genau die Frage sozusagen, welche dieser Statistiken sind wichtig. Man muss Statistiken darüber machen, welche Statistiken man überhaupt braucht. Und der Transformer hat einem quasi gesagt, was beim Lernprozess, also der macht Statistiken während des Lernprozesses und guckt, wo besonders viel Gain ist, wenn man an den statistischen Gewichten rumwackelt. Und später hat man das dann Attention genannt.
hierarchy of layers where every layer learns what to pay attention to in the given context in the previous layer. So what to make the statistics over.
And the context is significantly larger than the adjacent word.
Yes. So the context that this that GPT-3 has been using, the transformer itself is from 2017, and it's wasn't using that large of a context. OpenAI has basically scaled up this idea as far as they could at the time, and the context is about 2048 symbols, tokens in the language. These symbols are not characters, but they take the words and project them into a vector space.
Klar,
Where
Word-Embeddings.
words that are statistically co-occurring a lot are neighbors already. So it's already a simplification of the problem a little bit.
Also, ich weiß nicht, ich glaube, ich habe auch schon mal über Word-Embeddings geredet, ne? Das ist wirklich sexy, was da passiert. Vor allem dass man aus Beziehungen zwischen Worten eine arithmetische Beziehung in einem Vektorraum machen kann und dann mit denen Subtraktion und Addition machen kann, genauso wie man es mit Vektoren macht und das dann auch noch sozusagen Sinn zwischen Wortverbindungen darin abgebildet wird in Vektoren und das sozusagen die vollständige Arithmetik abbietet, das ist super geil. Na, also wenn ihr Word-Embeddings nicht kennt, da gibt es garantiert mittlerweile richtig gute Erklärvideos, die auch kurz sind, die das erklären mit dem Encoder, dem Decoder und wie sozusagen da auf einmal quasi rauskommt, wenn man vorne das Wort König reinsteckt, kommt ein Zahlentupel raus, also ein 300-dimensionaler Vektor. Wenn man das Wort Mann reinsteckt, kommt ein Zahlentupel raus. Und wenn man jetzt die Zahlentupel nimmt für König, da das Wort Mann abzieht, dann das Wort Frau drauf addiert und dann guckt, wo landet man in dem Raum, dann landet man ziemlich nahe an dem Wort Königin. Das ist quasi Das war für mich der absolute Overkill damals, als ich das mir drauf geschafft hatte, wie das ist mit den Word-Embeddings. Da war ich auch vollständig überzeugt davon, dass das der Shit ist. Vorher dachte ich so, okay, Deep Learning und so und naja, so. Aber als ich das gesehen hatte, war ich überzeugt, okay, es ist tatsächlich was. Es ist tatsächlich mehr als einfach nur rumspielen. Hat mich wirklich überzeugt damals.
And so every word is basically a set of coordinates in a high-dimensional space. And then they use some kind of trick to also encode the order of the words in a sentence, or in the not just sentence, but 2048 tokens is about a couple pages of text or 2.5 pages of text. And so they managed to do pretty exhaustive statistics over the potential relationships between 2 pages of text, which is tremendous, right? I was just using a single sentence back then. And I was only looking for first order relationships, and they were really looking for much, much higher level relationships. And what they discover after they fed this with an enormous amount of training data, pretty much the written internet, or a subset of it that had some quality, but substantial portion of the common crawl, that they're not only able to reproduce style, but they're also able to reproduce some pretty detailed semantics, like being able to add 3-digit numbers and multiply 2-digit numbers, or to translate between programming languages and things like that. So the results that GPT-3 got, I think, were amazing.
By the way, I actually didn't check carefully. It's funny you just mentioned how you coupled semantics to the multiplication. Is it able to do some basic math on
GPT-3 hat schon abgekackt bei vierstelliger Addition. Ne?
Okay, interesting. I thought there's a lot of failure cases.
Yeah, it basically fails if you take larger digit numbers. So 4-digit numbers and so on makes carrying mistakes and so on. And if you take larger numbers, you don't get useful results at all. And this could be an issue of the training set, where there are not many examples of successful long-form addition in standard human written text.
And humans aren't very good at doing 3-digit numbers either.
Yeah, and you're not writing a lot about it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that the loss function that is being used is only minimizing surprisal. So it's predicting what comes next in a typical text. It's not trying to go for causal closure.
Es geht ja nicht dabei um Wahrheitsgehalt oder logische Konsistenz, sondern nur das, was in einem Text als nächstes wahrscheinlich kommen würde. Und Texte müssen ja in sich dank der ganzen Laberfächer und dank der ganzen Bullshit, den wir haben, auch nicht logisch geschlossen oder konsistent sein. Und natürlich ist sozusagen das, was das Deep Learning lernt, Korrelation. Das hat überhaupt gar kein Modell von Kausalität.
As we do.
Yeah. But the fact that kind of prediction works to generate text that's semantically rich and consistent is interesting.
Yeah.
So it's amazing that it's able to generate semantically consistent text.
It's not consistent. So the problem is that it loses coherence at some point. But it's also, I think, not correct to say that GPT-3 is unable to deal with semantics at all. Because you ask it to perform certain transformations in text, and it performs these transformations in text. And the kind of additions that it's able to perform are transformations in text, right? And there are proper semantics involved. You can also do more.
Nee, es ist kein Code, es ist einfach nur eine Statistik. Na, du musst halt wirklich, also was Deep Learning kann, ist, du gibst einen Haufen Daten rein und sagst ihm, was hinten rauszukommen hat. Und es findet alle Korrelationen zwischen Input und Output, die du dir vorstellen kannst. Wenn du wenn das Deep Learning Netzwerk zu viele Parameter hat, dann betreibt es Overfitting, sprich, es wird einfach alle Daten, die du ihm gibst, als Trainingsdaten auswendig lernen, dann kann es nicht generalisieren. Und wenn du ihm zu wenig Datenpunkte gibst, zu wenig statistische Gewichte, dann kann es nichts lernen, weil sozusagen die Korrelationen mehr Speicher brauchen, als du ihm zur Verfügung stellst. Und der Trade-off, den du machen willst, ist eigentlich, du willst so wenig wie möglich Gewichte haben, dass es so viel wie möglich generalisieren kann und eine hohe Accuracy, wenn du es testest, sozusagen in der Prediction-Wahrscheinlichkeit kriegt. Aber was es macht, ist prinzipiell, es sucht in der Statistik nach Korrelationen. Na, also deswegen ist es eigentlich schon so, wir können eigentlich jetzt zusammenfassend schon sagen, wir als Menschheit haben aufgegeben, Dinge verstehen zu wollen. In dem Moment, wo wir KI-Lösungen draufschmeißen. Weil wir verstehen nicht, wie das Endergebnis zustande kommt. Wir verstehen es nicht. Wir haben nur eine Intuition dafür, wie wir die Netzwerkarchitektur wählen. Und dann lernt sich das Problem von selbst. Und wir werfen es mittlerweile auf Probleme drauf, die wir selber nicht verstanden haben. Es ist ja nicht mehr so, wie lern mal Schach und dann spiel mal gegen Kasparov, sondern mach mal hier Proteinfaltung bitte, wir checken es eh nicht. Das ist sozusagen der Level, auf dem wir jetzt leben. Das heißt, zukünftige Lösungen für irgendwelche Probleme werden von uns nicht verstanden, sondern wir haben nur noch so weit verstanden, dass wie wir das Netzwerk, wie die Architektur des Netzwerks sein muss, damit sich das Netzwerk das Problem selber beibringt.
That was generating lots and lots of mathematically correct text and was feeding this into a transformer. And
ja, Explainable AI, ja. Da bin ich ehrlich gesagt irgendwie unschlüssig, weil ich meine, es gibt ja so viele Spielereien, sowas wie diese damals bei den GANs und so, da wurde doch auch schon damit rumgespielt, dass man sich anguckt, wie das Netzwerk träumt, ne? Wenn sie sich sozusagen Zwischenergebnisse grafisch darstellen lassen zwischen irgendwelchen Layers und so, irgendwie bei einem CNN zum Beispiel mal kurz abbilden auf dem Bild, ne? Und dann vielleicht noch mit einer Attention, ne, mit einer Attention-Maske drauf gucken, damit man sieht, wie das Netzwerk träumt und so, in Anführungsstrichen. Weiß ich nicht. Ich glaube, das ist Spielerei tatsächlich. Aber gut, ich bin auch kein Experte für sozusagen Machine Learning. Explainable AI. Ich müsste mir vielleicht mal dazu mal was Aktuelles draufziehen. Computer Feel hat da bestimmt ein gutes Video dazu oder so.
As a result, it was able to learn how to do differentiation and integration in ways that, according to the authors, Mathematica could not. To which some of the people in Mathematica responded that they were not using the Mathematica in the right way and so on. I have not really followed the resolution of this conflict.
This part, as a small tangent, I really don't like in machine learning papers, which they often do anecdotal evidence. They'll find like one example in some kind of specific use of Mathematica and demonstrate, look, they'll show successes and failures, but they won't have a very clear representation of how many cases this actually represents.
Yes, but I think as a first paper, this is a pretty good start. And yeah, so the take-home message, I think, is that the authors could get better results from this in their experiments than they could get from the way in which they were using computer algebra systems, which means that was not nothing.
Yeah.
And it's able to perform substantially better than GPT-3 can, based on a much larger amount of training data, using the same underlying algorithm.
Well, let me ask again. So I'm using your tweets as if this is like Plato, right? Like, as if this is well thought out novels that you've written. You tweeted, GPT-4 is listening to us now.
Ja, klar.
This is one way of asking, what are the limitations of GPT-3 when it scales? So what do you think will be the capabilities of GPT-4, GPT-5, and so on? What are the limits of this approach?
So obviously, when we are writing things right now, everything that we are writing now is going to be training data for the next generation of machine learning models. So yes, of course, GPT-4 is listening to us. And I think the tweet is already a little bit older, and we now have Wudao, and we have a number of other systems that basically are placeholders for GPT-4. Don't know what OpenAI's plans are in this regard.
I read that tweet in several ways. So one is obviously everything you put on the internet is used as training data. But in a second way I read it is in we talked about agency. I read it as almost like GPT-4 is intelligent enough to be choosing to listen. So not only like did a programmer tell it to collect this data and use it for training, I almost saw the humorous angle, which is like it has achieved AGI kind of thing.
Well, the thing is, could we already be living in GPT-5?
So GPT-4 is listening, and GPT-5 actually constructing the entirety of the reality. Where
of course, in some sense, what everybody is trying to do right now in AI is to extend the transformer to be able to deal with video. And
okay, also wir wissen ja jetzt schon, GPT-4 kann Images und Text, ne? Und also es kann sozusagen multimodal. Das heißt, GPT-5 wird garantiert dann Videos machen, ne? Weil ich denke, das Problem im Moment ist sozusagen, dass selbst wenn man gute Videocodecs nimmt, die nur die Ableitung nehmen und so, ne? Und wenn man sozusagen die ganze Mathematik der Codecs da draufschmeißt, die wir schon haben, selbst dann ist wahrscheinlich das Datenvolumen noch zu krass, dass GPT Videos gucken kann. Also ganze Videos jetzt, ne? Ich rede jetzt nicht von 2 Sekunden mit 10 Frames, sondern ich rede hier von 2 Stunden Film. So nach dem Motto, guck mal Oppenheimer und mach mir mal eine Zusammenfassung oder so.
There are very promising extensions, right? There's a work by Google that is called Perceiver, and that is overcoming some of the limitations of the transformer by letting it learn the topology of the different modalities separately, and by training it to find better input features. So basically feature abstractions that are being used by this successor to GPT-3 are chosen in such a way that it's able to deal with video input. Mm-hmm. And there is more to be done. So one of the limitations of GPT-3 is that it's amnesiac. So it forgets everything beyond the 2 pages that it currently reads, also during generation, not just during learning.
Do you think that's fixable within the space of deep learning? Can you just make a bigger input?
No, I don't think that our own working memory is infinitely large. It's probably also just a few thousand bits. But what you can do is you can structure this working memory. So instead of just force feeding this thing a certain thing that it has to focus on, and it's not allowed to focus on anything else with its network, you allow it to construct its own working memory, as we do, right? When we are reading a book, it's not that we are focusing our attention in such a way that we can only remember the current page. We will also try to remember other pages and try to undo what we learned from them or modify what we learned from them. We might get up and take another book from the shelf. We might go out and ask somebody, right? We can edit our working memory in any way that is useful to put a context together that allows us to draw the right inferences and to learn the right things.
Ja.
So this ability to...
Also was auf jeden Fall passiert, wenn wir ein Buch lesen, ist, dass wir Datenkomprimierung direkt machen. Ne? Wir merken uns nicht, welche Worte da jetzt auf der letzten Page gestanden haben, sondern wir merken uns den Inhalt. Wir machen bereits eine Datenkomprimierung. Und diese Datenkomprimierung wird dargestellt in unserem Kopf als Geschichte. In unserem Kopf. Mit der internen Sprache, die unser Gehirn verwendet. Und die wir wiederum abbilden können auf Worte. Wir können anschließend die Geschichte wiedergeben, aber dann in unseren eigenen Worten.
Perform experiments on the world based on an attempt to become fully coherent and to achieve causal closure, to achieve a certain aesthetic of your modeling. That is something that eventually needs to be done. And at the moment, we are skirting this in some sense by building systems that are larger and faster so they can use dramatically larger resources than human beings can do and much more training data to get to models.
Das ist tatsächlich das, was es macht. Ne? GPT-4 und GPT-3 und auch GPT 3,5 und so, klar. Das ist einfach nur Overkill. Ne? Das, was möglich war, an quasi mit Rechenzeit zu erreichen und ein paar, was weiß ich, Milliarden $, das hat OpenAI dann einfach gemacht. Und ich erinnere mich noch super gerne an Ben Goertzel, weil der hatte halt so drüber geredet, so wie von wegen, ja, super, jetzt haben sie da übelst viel Geld rausgeschmissen. Da steckt keine besondere Erkenntnis drin. Das weiß eh schon jeder, dass es geht. Jetzt haben sie es halt gemacht, ne? Und jetzt haben sie da ein kleines Tool, mit dem sie irgendwie die Öffentlichkeit so ein bisschen so aufscheuchen können. Aber ja, klar, das ist halt einfach sozusagen eine Spielerei.
Already way superhuman, and in other ways are laughingly incoherent.
So do you think sort of making the systems like, what would you say, multi-resolutional? So like some of the language models are focused on 2 pages, some are focused on 2 books. Some are focused on 2 years of reading. Some are focused on a lifetime. So it's like stacks of it's the GPT-3s all the way down.
And you want to have gaps in between them. So it's not necessarily 2 years. There's no gaps. It's things out of 2 years or out of 20 years or 2,000 years or 2 billion years, where you are just selecting those bits that are predicted to be the most useful ones to understand what you're currently doing. And this prediction itself requires a very complicated model. And that's the actual model that you need to be making. It's not just that you are trying to understand the relationships between things, but what you need to make relationships, discover relationships over.
I wonder what that thing looks like, what the architecture for the thing that's able to have that kind of model.
I think it needs more degrees of freedom than the current models have. So it starts out with the fact that you possibly don't just want to have a feed-forward model, but you want it to be fully recurrent. And to make it fully recurrent, you probably need to loop it back into itself and allow it to skip connections. Once you do this, right, when you're predicting the next frame and your internal next frame in every moment, and you are able to skip connection, it means that signals can travel from the output of the network into the middle of the network faster than the inputs do.
Do you think it can still be differentiable? Do you think it still can be a neural network?
Sometimes it can, and sometimes it cannot. So it can still be a neural network, but not a fully differentiable one. And when you want to deal with non-differentiable ones, you need to have an attention system that is discrete and low-dimensional and can perform grammatical operations. You need to be able to perform program synthesis. You need to be able to backtrack in these operations that you perform on this thing. And this thing needs a model of what it's currently doing.
Also das Hauptproblem ist bei diesen Lernprozessen, dass der Backpropagating Step, wie Sie schon sagen, differentiable sein muss. Also man muss die Ableitungen bilden können. Ne? Das heißt, da dürfen keine Unstetigkeitsstellen drin sein. Deswegen wurden nach dem Perzeptron ja diese Sigmoid-Funktionen eingeführt, die statt der Treppenfunktion, die so unstetig hochgeht, so smooth Verbindungen, zum Beispiel ein Sinus oder ein Polynom dritten Grades oder so, eingebaut werden, damit die Ableitungen von den Dingern nicht divergieren. Ne, damit man sozusagen, wenn man dann, also man hat seinen Input, tut den rein, kriegt was raus und dann hat man ein Error-Signal, wenn man weiß, was eigentlich rauskommen soll. Und dieses Error-Signal, die Differenz quasi, die muss zurückgetragen werden ins System. Und bei diesem Zurücktragen muss man gucken, wie sozusagen das entstanden ist. Alle Verknüpfungen, die dazu beigetragen haben, müssen entsprechend ihrer Wichtung so berücksichtigt werden, dass die Ableitungen davon sozusagen das Lernen ausmachen. Wenn man aber das nicht perfekt rücktrecken kann, dann hat man schon ein Problem. Ne? Und er sagt jetzt sozusagen, man muss es irgendwie abbilden können auf so einen Lernprozess.
And I think this is exactly the purpose of our own consciousness.
Yeah, the program things that do you think it still could be a neural network?
Sometimes it can, and sometimes it cannot. So it can still be a neural network, but not a fully differentiable one. And when you want to deal with non-differentiable ones, you need to have an attention system that is discrete and low-dimensional and can perform grammatical operations. You need to be able to perform program synthesis. You need to be able to backtrack in these operations that you perform on this thing. And this thing needs a model of what it's currently doing. And I think this is...
Also, wenn man, also, das ist offen, also so verstehe ich das jetzt, wenn man also diese Unstetigkeiten hat, was es geben kann, wenn man eine Architektur wählt, die so ist, dann muss es eine interne Sprache geben, die darüber sprechen kann. Also es muss insofern formalisierbar sein, dass man es trotzdem, dass man den Lernprozess trotzdem darauf anwenden kann. So habe ich es jetzt verstanden. Das heißt, man braucht eine Attention, die quasi darüber reden kann, ohne dass es divergiert. Ne? Also eine alternative Sprache zu finden für diesen Lernprozess.
It's exactly the purpose of our own consciousness.
Yeah, the program thing's a tricky one with neural networks. So let me ask you, it's not quite program synthesis, but the application of these language models to program synthesis, but generation of programs. So
Also um Feedback von außen, also es geht hier nicht darum, dass man irgendwie, Reinforcement Learning hat. Er hat jetzt ganz allgemein gesprochen, ne? Reinforcement Learning wäre, dass du dem System gar nicht sagst, welche Kostenfunktion es minimieren soll, sondern das muss es selber rausfinden und so. Und dann gibt es Unsupervised Learning, wo man nicht mal mehr hinguckt, ne? Wo das System das alles von alleine macht. Aber darum ging es eigentlich nicht. Sondern es ging nur darum, dass du, also diese smoothen Verbindungen zwischen den Input und Output der Zwischenlayer, das ist eine Architekturentscheidung. Und das erste neuronale Netzwerk, was bekannt ist, ist das von Frank Rosenblatt, das Perzeptron. Und das hatte halt harte Flanken als Übersetzung. Und das hat deswegen auch nicht so gut funktioniert, weil der Lernprozess nicht gut funktioniert hat, weil du konntest die Ableitung von dem, wenn du das rückprojiziert hast, quasi das Error-Signal, wie es sich verteilen muss, dafür brauchst du die Ableitung von dem Ding. Und wenn da Unstetigkeiten drin sind, dann kackt das halt ab. Und die Lösung war halt, das Smooth zu machen. Also statt einer starken Heaviside-Function irgendwas zu machen, was einen smoothen Übergang hat von 1 nach 0 quasi.
If you look at GitHub Open Pilot, which is based on OpenAI's Codex, I don't know if you got a chance to look at it, but it's the system that's able to generate code once you prompt it with, what is it? Like the header of a function with some comments. And it seems to do an incredibly good job, or not a perfect job, which is very important, but an incredibly good job of generating functions. What do you make of that? Is this exciting, or is this just a party trick, a demo? Or is this revolutionary?
I haven't worked with it yet, so it's difficult for me to judge it. But I would not be surprised if it turns out to be revolutionary. And that's because the majority of programming tasks that are being done in the industry right now are not creative.
Yeah.
People are writing code that other people have written. Or they're putting things together from code fragments that others have had. And a lot of the work that programmers do in practice is to figure out how to overcome the gaps in their current knowledge in the things that people have already done.
How to copy and paste from Stack Overflow. That's right.
And so, of course, we can automate that.
Yeah. To make it much faster to copy and paste from Stack Overflow.
Yes, but it's not just copying and pasting. It's also basically learning which parts you need to modify to make them fit together.
Yeah. Like literally sometimes as simple as just changing the variable names so it fits into the rest of your code
Yes,
base.
but this requires that you understand the semantics of what you're doing to some degree.
Yeah. And you can automate some of those things.
Yes.
The thing that makes people nervous, of course, is that
ja, und dann gibt es so Trolle, die absichtlich Spaghetti-Code so bauen, dass die Variablennamen genau vertauschten Sinn ergeben und so, dass der Code unlesbar wird.
Bit wrong in a program can have a dramatic effect on the actual final operation of that program. So like one little error, which in the space of language doesn't really matter, but in the space of programs can matter a lot.
Yes, but this is already what is happening when humans program code.
Yeah, this is
we have a technology to deal with this.
Somehow it becomes scarier when you know that a program generated code that's running a nuclear power plant. It becomes scarier. You know, humans have errors too.
Exactly.
But it's scarier when a program is doing it because why? I mean, there's a fear that a program may not be as good as humans to know when stuff is important, to not mess up. Like, there's a misalignment of priorities, of values that's potential. That maybe that's the source of the worry. I mean, okay, if I give you code generated by GitHub Open Pilot and code generated by a human and say, here, use one of these, which how do you select today and in the next 10 years which code to use? Wouldn't you still be comfortable with the human?
At the moment, when you go to Stanford to get an MRI, they will write a bill to the insurance over $20,000. And of this, maybe half of that gets paid by the insurance and a quarter gets paid by you.
Yeah.
And the MRI costs them $600 to make, maybe, probably less. And what are the values of the person that writes the software and deploys this process? it's very difficult for me to say whether I trust people. I think that what happens there is a mixture of proper Anglo-Saxon Protestant values, where somebody is trying to serve an abstract greater whole, and organized crime.
Well, that's a very harsh. You're
Ja, sehr schön. Fantastisch. Das gefällt mir sehr gut. Ausbeutung, Junge.
I think that's a harsh view of humanity. There's a lot of bad people, whether incompetent or just malevolent in this world, yes. But it feels like the more malevolent the more damage you do to the world, the more resistance you have in your own human, like...
But
Junge, ich
how
hab eine lange Hose
explain
an.
is malevolence or stupidity what can be explained by just people acting on their incentives? Right, so what happens in Stanford is not that somebody is evil. It's just that they do what they're being paid for.
No,
And this is...
it's not evil. That's I tend to... So, no, I see that as malevolence. I see as even like being a good German, as I told you offline, is...
Er hat doch schon gesagt, Anglo-Saxon Protestant Values und so. Hat er doch schon gesagt.
It's not absolute malevolence, but it's a small amount. It's cowardice. I mean, when you see there's something wrong with the world, it's either incompetence that you're not able to see it, or it's cowardice that you're not able to stand up, not necessarily in a big way, but in a small way. So I do think that is in a bit of malevolence. I'm not sure the example you're describing is a good example.
So the question is, what is it that you are aiming for? And if you don't believe in a future, if you, for instance, think that the dollar is going to crash, why would you try to save dollars? If you don't think that humanity will be around in 100 years from now because global warming will wipe out civilization, why would you need to act as if it were? Right. So the question is there an overarching aesthetics that is projecting you and the world into the future, which I think is the basic idea of religion, that you understand the interactions that we have with each other as some kind of civilization level agent that is projecting itself into the future. If you don't have that shared purpose, right, what is there to be ethical for? So I think when we talk about ethics in AI, we need to go beyond the insane bias discussions and so on, where people are just measuring the distance between a statistic to their preferred current world model.
But the optimism... Wait. I was a little confused by the previous thing. Just to clarify,
Es gibt nur ein paar Sachen von Joscha Bach auf Deutsch. Die sind aber auch natürlich alle sehr empfehlenswert. Ich habe ihn ja getroffen und ich habe ihm auch einen Liebesbrief zugesteckt und so. Er wird ihn garantiert gelesen haben, aber er reagiert nicht auf E-Mails, weil er kriegt jeden Tag 1000 E-Mails. Das ist das Problem. Mein Ziel ist, ihn irgendwann zum GMM zu kriegen. Warum sollte er etwas auf Deutsch machen? Guck mal, alle, die deutsch sind und Joscha Bach Fanboys sind, gucken sich seinen Scheiß auch auf Englisch an. Es ist sozusagen, ja, warum sollte er das tun? Er macht es schon. Es gibt ein paar Sachen von ihm auf Deutsch. Aber halt nicht viel. Weil er hat keine Zeit, verstehst du? Der Typ ist übelst am Grinden.
There is a kind of underlying morality to having an optimism that human civilization will persist for longer than 100 years. I think a lot of people believe that it's a good thing for us to keep living.
Yeah, of course.
And thriving.
This morality itself is not an end to itself. It's instrumental to people living in 100 years from now.
Right.
Or 500 years from now, right? So it's only justifiable if you actually think that it will lead to people or increase the probability of people being around in that time frame. And a lot of people don't actually believe that, at least not actively.
But I believe what exactly? So I was...
most people don't believe that they can afford to act on such a model. Basically, what happens in the US is I think that the healthcare system is for a lot of people no longer sustainable, which means that if they need the help of the healthcare system, they're often not able to afford it.
Yeah.
And when they cannot help it, they are often going bankrupt. I think the leading cause of personal bankruptcy in the US is the healthcare system.
Yeah.
And
super.
that would not be necessary. It's not because people are consuming more and more medical services and are achieving a much, much longer life as a result. That's not actually the story that is happening, because you can compare it to other countries. And life expectancy in the US is currently not increasing, and it's not as high as in all the other industrialized countries. So some industrialized countries are doing better with a much cheaper healthcare system. And what you can see is, for instance, administrative bloat. The healthcare system has, maybe to some degree deliberately, set up as
Ja, dieses Bild habe ich auch schon ein paar Mal gezeigt, ne? Dass die Anzahl der Ärzte und Krankenhauspersonal linear gestiegen ist in den letzten 50 Jahren. Und irgendwo 1990 oder 1980 oder so gibt es einen übelsten Knicks in der Administration und auf einmal ist die Administration auf 3000% gestiegen oder so.
job placement program to allow people to continue living in middle class
GMM ist
existence
mein
despite
Talkformat auf dem
not having
YouTube-Kanal.
useful
Hallo Google.
use case in productivity. So they are being paid to push paper around. And the number of administrators in the healthcare system has been increasing much faster than the number of practitioners. And this is something that you have to pay for, right? And also the revenues that are being generated in the healthcare system are relatively large, and somebody has to pay for them. And the result why they are so large is because market mechanisms are not working. Right? The FDA is largely not protecting people from malpractice of healthcare providers. The FDA is protecting healthcare providers from competition.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
So this is a thing that has to do with values. And this is not because people are malicious on all levels. It's because they are not incentivized to act on a greater whole, on this idea that you treat somebody who comes to you as a patient like you would treat a family member.
But we're trying. I mean, you're highlighting a lot of the flaws of the different institutions, the systems we're operating under. But I think there's a continued throughout history mechanism design of trying to design incentives in such a way that these systems behave better and better and better.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a very difficult thing to operate a society of hundreds of millions of people effectively with.
Yes. So do we live in a society that is ever correcting?
Right,
Do we
that's-
observe that our models of what we are doing are predictive of the future, and when they are not, we improve them? Our laws adjudicated with clauses that you put into every law what is meant to be achieved by that law, and the law will be automatically repealed if it's not achieving that, right? If you are optimizing your own laws, if you're writing your own source code, you probably make an estimate of what is the thing that's currently wrong in my life? What is it that I should change about my own policies?
Mm-hmm.
What is the expected outcome? And if that outcome doesn't manifest, I will change the policy back, right? Or I will change it to something different. Are we doing this on a societal level?
I think so. I think it's easy to sort of highlight I think we're doing it in the way that like I operate my current life. I didn't sleep much last night. You would say that Lex, the way you need to operate your life is you need to always get sleep. The fact that you didn't sleep last night is totally the wrong way to operate in your life. Like you should have gotten all your shit done in time and gotten to sleep, because sleep is very important for health. And you're highlighting, look, this person is not sleeping. Look, the healthcare system is operating poor. But the point is that it seems like this is the way, especially in the capitalist society, we operate. We keep running into trouble, and last minute we try to get our way out through innovation, and it seems to work. You have a lot of people that ultimately are trying to build a better world and get urgency about them when it's the problem becomes more and more imminent. And that's the way this operates. But if you look at the history, the long arc of history, it seems like that operating on deadlines produces progress and builds better and better systems.
You probably agree with me that the US should have engaged in mask production in January 2020, and that we should have shut down the airports early on, and that we should have made it mandatory that the people
Mask
that work
production,
in
ne?
nursing homes are living on campus rather than living at home and then coming in and infecting people in the nursing homes that had no immune response to COVID. And that is something that was, I think, visible back then. The correct decisions haven't been made. If we would have the same situation again, how do we know that these wrong decisions are not being made again? Have the people that made the decisions to not protect the nursing homes been punished? have the people that made the wrong decisions with respect to testing, that prevented the development of testing by startup companies and the importing of tests from countries that already had them, have these people been held responsible?
Yeah, well, first of all, so what do you want to put before the firing squad? I think they are.
No, just make sure that this doesn't happen again.
No, but see, but it's not that. Yes, they're being held responsible by many voices, by people being frustrated. There's new leaders being born now that we're going to see rise to the top in 10 years. This moves slower than there's obviously a lot of older incompetence and bureaucracy, and these systems move slowly. They move, like science, one death at a time. So like, yes, I think the pain that's been felt in the previous year is reverberating throughout the world.
Maybe I'm getting old. I suspect that every generation in the US after the war has lost the plot even more. I don't see this development.
The war, World War II?
Yeah, so basically there was a time when we were modernist. And in this modernist time, the US felt actively threatened by the things that happened in the world. The US was worried about possibility of failure. And this imminence of possible failure led to decisions, right? There was a time when the government would listen to physicists about how to do things.
Yeah.
And the physicists were actually concerned about what the government should be doing. So they would be writing letters to the government. And so, for instance, the decision for the Manhattan Project was something that was driven in a conversation between physicists and the government. I don't think such a discussion would take place today.
I disagree. I think if the virus was much deadlier, we would see a very different response. I think the virus was not sufficiently deadly. And instead, because it wasn't very deadly, what happened is the current system started to politicize it. The mask, this is what I realized with masks early on. They were not, very quickly became not as a solution, but they became a thing that politicians used to divide the country. So that same thing is happening with vaccines, same thing. So like people weren't talking about solutions to this problem because I don't think the problem was bad enough. When you talk about the war, I think our lives are too comfortable. I think in the developed world, things are too good and we have not faced severe dangers.
Sieht die Klassengesellschaft nicht, ne? Aber gut. Man kann ja nicht alles sehen.
When the severe dangers, existential threats are faced, that's when we step up on a small scale and a large scale. Now, that's sort of my argument here, but I did think the virus I was hoping that it was actually sufficiently dangerous for us to step up, because especially in the early days, it was unclear. It still is unclear because of mutations, how bad it might be. Right. And so I thought we would step up. And even so, the masks point is a tricky one, because to me, the manufacture of masks isn't even the problem. I'm still to this day, and I was involved with a bunch of this work, have not seen good science done on whether masks work or not. Like there still has not been a large scale study. To me, there should be large scale studies on every possible solution, like aggressive. In the same way that the vaccine development was aggressive, there should be masks which test what kind of tests work really well, what kind of like even the question of how the virus spreads.
Also, dass eine Atemwegskrankheit und Masken irgendwie zusammenhängen, naja.
There should be aggressive studies on that to understand. I'm still, as far as I know, there's still a lot of uncertainty about that. Nobody wants to see this as an engineering problem that needs to be solved. It's that I was surprised about, but I
find that our views are largely convergent, but not completely. So I agree with this thing that because our society, in some sense, perceives itself as too big to fail,
right?
And the virus did not alert people to the fact that we are facing possible failure. That basically put us into the postmodernist mode. And I don't mean in a philosophical sense, but in a societal sense. The difference between a postmodern society and the modern society is that the modernist society has to deal with the ground truth, and the postmodernist society has to deal with appearances. Politics becomes a performance, and the performance is done for an audience, and the organized audience is the media. and the media evaluates itself via other media, right? So you have an audience of critics that evaluate themselves. And I don't think it's so much the failure of the politicians, because to get in power and to stay in power, you need to be able to deal with the published opinion.
Well, I think it goes in cycles, because what's going to happen is all of the small business owners, all the people who truly are suffering and will suffer more because of the effects of the closure of the economy and the lack of solutions to the virus, they're going to uprise, and hopefully, I mean, this is where charismatic leaders can get the world in trouble, but hopefully we'll elect great leaders that will break through this postmodernist idea of the media and the perception and the drama on Twitter and all that kind of stuff.
But this can go either way.
Yeah.
When the Weimar Republic was unable to deal with the economic crisis that Germany was facing, there was an option to go back. And there were people which thought, let's get back to a constitutional monarchy and let's get this to work, because democracy doesn't work. And eventually, there was no way back. People decided there was no way back. They needed to go forward. And the only options for going forward was to become Stalinist communist, basically an option to completely expropriate the factories and so on and nationalize them, and to reorganize Germany in communist terms and ally itself with Stalin and fascism. And both options were obviously very bad. And the one that the Germans picked led to a catastrophe that was that devastated Europe. And I'm not sure if the US has an immune response against that. I think that the far right is currently very weak in the US, but this can easily change.
Do you think, from a historical perspective, Hitler could have been stopped from within Germany or from outside? Or this, well, depends on who you want to focus, whether you want to focus on Stalin or Hitler. But it feels like Hitler was the one, as a political movement, that could have been stopped.
I think that the point was that a lot of people wanted Hitler. So he got support from a lot of quarters. There was a number of industrialists who supported him, because they thought that the democracy is obviously not working and unstable, and you need a strong man. And he was willing to play that part. There were also people in the US who thought that Hitler would stop Stalin and would act as a bulwark against Bolshevism, which he probably would have done, right? Yeah. But at which cost? And then many of the things that he was going to do, like the Holocaust, was something where people thought this is rhetoric. He's not actually going to do this.
Right.
Especially many of the Jews themselves, which were humanists. And for them, this was outside of the scope that was thinkable.
Right. I mean, I wonder if Hitler is uniquely, I want to carefully use this term, but uniquely evil. So if Hitler was never born, if somebody else would come in his place. So like, just thinking about the progress of history, how important are those singular figures that lead to mass destruction and cruelty? Because my sense is Hitler was unique. It wasn't just about the environment and the content.
Das ist ja das Schöne an diesem Wettbewerbsfilter. Der spült halt wirklich die richtigen Opfer nach oben, die dann alles für den Wettbewerb tun. Und wenn es en vogue ist, seit 100 Jahren, die Juden für alles verantwortlich zu machen, dann, dann ist es nur eine Frage der Zeit, bis einer mal durchgreift und das mal ernst nimmt, diese Scheiße.
Text that gave him, like another person would not come in his place to do as destructive of the things that he did. There was a combination of charisma, of madness, of psychopathy, of just ego, all those things, which are very unlikely to come together in one person in the right time.
It also depends on the context of the country that you're operating in. If you tell the Germans that they have a historical destiny in this romantic country, the effect is probably different than it is in other countries. Sure. But Stalin has killed a few more people than Hitler did. And if you look at the probability that you survived under Stalin, right? Hitler killed people if he thought they were not worth living, or if they were harmful to his racist project, right? He basically felt that the Jews would be too cosmopolitan and would not be willing to participate in a racist redefinition of society and the value of society and an ethno state in this way, that as he wanted it to have it. So he saw them as a harmful danger, especially since they played such an important role in the economy and culture of Germany. And so he had some radical but rational reason to murder them. And Stalin just killed everyone. He basically, the Stalinist purges were such a random thing where he said that there's a certain possibility that this particular part of the population has a number of German collaborators or something, and we just kill them all.
Yeah.
Right? Or if you look at what Mao did, the number of people that were killed in absolute numbers were much higher under Mao than they were under Stalin. So it's super hard to say. The other thing is that you look at Genghis Khan and so on, how many people he killed. When you see there are a number of things that happen in human history that actually really put a substantial dent in the existing population, or Napoleon. Mm-hmm. And it's very difficult to eventually measure it, because what's happening is basically evolution on a human scale, where one monkey figures out a way to become viral and is using this viral technology to change the patterns of society at a very, very large scale. And what we find so abhorrent about these changes is the complexity that is being destroyed by this. That it's basically like a big fire that burns out a lot of the existing culture and structure that existed before.
Yeah, and it all just starts with one monkey, one charismatic ape. And there's a bunch of them throughout history.
Yeah, but it's in a given environment. It's basically similar to wildfires in California, right? Yeah. The temperature is rising. There is less rain falling. And then suddenly a single spark can have an effect that in other times would be contained.
Okay. Speaking of which, I love how when we went to Hitler and Stalin from 20, 30 minutes ago, GPT-3 doing program synthesis. The argument was about morality of AI versus human. So, and specifically in the context of writing programs, specifically in the context of programs that can be destructive. So running nuclear power plants or autonomous weapon systems, for example. And I think your inclination was to say that it's not so obvious that AI would be less moral than humans, or less effective at making a world that would make humans happy.
So I'm not talking about self-directed systems that are making their own goals at a global scale. If you just talk about the deployment of technological systems that are able to see order and patterns and use this as control models to act on the goals that we give them, then if we have the correct incentives to set the correct incentives for these systems, I'm quite optimistic.
So humans versus AI. Let me give you an example. Autonomous weapon systems. Let's say there's a city somewhere in the Middle East that has a number of terrorists. And the question is, what's currently done with drone technologies, you have information about the location of a particular terrorist, and you have a targeted attack. You have a bombing of that particular building. And that's all directed by humans at the high level strategy, and also at the deployment of individual bombs and missiles. Like the actual, everything is done by human except the final targeting. And it's like with spots, similar thing, like control the flight. Okay, what if you give AI control and saying, write a program that says, here's the best information I have available about the location of these 5 terrorists. Here's the city. Make sure it's all the bombing you do is constrained to the city. Make sure it's precision based, but you take care of it. So you do one level of abstraction out and saying, take care of the terrorists in the city. Which are you more comfortable with, the humans or the JavaScript GPT-3 generated code that's doing the deployment? I mean, this is the kind of question I'm asking, is the kind of bugs that we see in human nature, are they better or worse than the kind of bugs we see in AI?
There are different bugs. There is an issue that if people are creating an imperfect automation of a process that normally requires a moral judgment, and this moral judgment is the reason why it cannot be automated often is not because the computation is too expensive, but because the model that you give the AI is not an adequate model of the dynamics of the world, because the AI does not understand the context that it's operating in the right way. And this is something that already happens with Excel, right? You don't need to have an AI system to do this. If you have an automated process in place where humans decide using automated criteria whom to kill when and whom to target when, which already happens, right? And you have no way to get off the kill list once that happens. Once you have been targeted according to some automatic criterion by people, right, in a bureaucracy. That is the issue. The issue is not the AI, it's the automation.
So there's something about, right, it's automation.
Aber AI
but
ist
there's
doch
something
all
about
about automation.
there's a certain level of abstraction where you give control to AI to do the automation. There's a scale that could be achieved that it feels like the scale of bug and scale of mistake and scale of destruction that can be achieved of the kind that humans cannot achieve. So AI is much more able to destroy an entire country accidentally versus humans. It feels like the more civilians die as a or suffer as the consequences of your decisions, the more weight there is on the human mind to make that decision. And so like it becomes more and more unlikely to make that decision for humans. For AI, it feels like it's harder to encode that kind of weight.
In a way, the AI that we're currently building is automating statistics, right? Intelligence is the ability to make models so you can act on them, and AI is a tool to make better models. So in principle, if you're using AI wisely, you're able to prevent more harm. And I think that the main issue is not on the side of the AI, it's on the side of the human command hierarchy that is using technology irresponsibly.
Yes. So the question is, how hard is it to encode, to properly encode the right incentives into the AI?
So for instance, there's this idea, what happens if we let our airplanes being flown with AI systems and the neural network is a black box and so on. And it turns out our neural networks are actually not black boxes anymore. There are function approximators using linear algebra, and there are performing things that we can understand. But we can also, instead of letting the neural network fly the airplane, use the neural network to generate a provably correct program with a degree of accuracy of the proof that a human could not achieve. Right? So we can use our AI by combining different technologies to build systems that are much more reliable than the systems that a human being could create. And so in this
Ich
sense,
denke, für so Sachen wie Strahlentherapie und so wird sowas auch schon gemacht.
I would say that
So
if you use an
Bewertung,
early
ne?
stage of technology to save labor and don't employ competent people, but just to hack something together because you can, that is very dangerous. And if people are acting under these incentives that they get away with delivering shoddy work more cheaply using AI with less human oversight than before, that's very dangerous.
The thing is, though, AI is still going to be unreliable, perhaps less so than humans, but it'll be unreliable in novel ways. And
yeah, but this is an empirical question, and it's something that we can figure out and work with. So the issue is, do we trust the systems, the social systems that we have in place and the social systems that we can build and maintain, that they're able to use AI responsibly? If they can, then AI is good news. If they cannot, then it's going to make the existing problems worse.
Well, and also who creates the AI, who controls it, who makes money from it, because it's ultimately humans. And then you start talking about how much you trust the humans.
So the question is, what does who mean? I don't think that we have identity per se. I think that the story of a human being is somewhat random. What happens is more or less that everybody is acting on their local incentives, what they perceive to be their incentives. And the question is, what are the incentives that the one that is pressing the button is operating under?
Yeah. it's nice for those incentives to be transparent. So, for example, I'll give you an example. There seems to be a significant distrust of tech, like entrepreneurs in the tech space, or people that run, for example, social media companies like Mark Zuckerberg. There's not a complete transparency of incentives under which that particular human being operates. We can listen to the words he says or what the marketing team says for a company, but we don't know. And that's becomes a problem when the algorithms and the systems created by him and other people in that company start having more and more impact on society. And that it starts, if the incentives were somehow, the definition and the explainability of the incentives was decentralized, such that nobody can manipulate it, no propaganda type manipulation of like how these systems actually operate could be done, then yes, it'd be not. I think AI could achieve much fairer, much more effective like solutions to difficult ethical problems. But when there's like humans in the loop manipulating the dissemination, the communication of how the system actually works, that feels like you can run into a lot of trouble. And that's why there's currently a lot of distrust for people at the heads of companies that have increasingly powerful AI systems.
I suspect what happened traditionally in the US was that since our decision-making is much more decentralized than in an authoritarian state, right? People are making decisions autonomously at many, many levels in a society. What happened that was we created coherence and cohesion in society by controlling what people thought and what information they had.
Right.
The media synchronized public opinion. And social media have disrupted this. It's not, I think, so much Russian influence or something. It's everybody's influence. It's that a random person can come up with a conspiracy theory and disrupt what people think. And if that conspiracy theory is more compelling or more attractive than the standardized public conspiracy theory that we give people as a default, then it might get more traction, right? You suddenly have the situation that a single individual somewhere on a farm in Texas has more listeners than CNN.
Which particular farmer are you referring to in Texas? I
probably know.
Yes, I've had dinner with him a couple of times. Okay.
Right, it's an interesting situation because you cannot get to be an anchor in CNN if you don't go through a complicated gatekeeping process. And suddenly you have random people without that gatekeeping process just optimizing for attention.
Yeah.
Not necessarily with a lot of responsibility for the long-term effects of projecting these theories into the public.
Attention
and now there is a push of making social media more like traditional media, which means that the opinion that is being projected in social media is more limited to an acceptable range, with the goal of getting society into safe waters and increase the stability and cohesion of society again, which I think is a laudable goal. But of course, it also is an opportunity to seize the means of indoctrination. And the incentives that people are under when they do this are in such a way that the AI ethics that we would need becomes very often something like AI politics, which is basically partisan and ideological. And this means that whatever one side says, another side is going to be disagreeing with, right? In the same way as when you turn masks or the vaccine into a political issue, if you say that it is politically virtuous to get vaccinated, it will mean that the people that don't like you will not want to get vaccinated, right? And as soon as you have this partisan discourse, it's going to be very hard to make the right decisions because the incentives get to be the wrong ones. AI ethics needs to be super boring. It needs to be done by people who do statistics all the time and have extremely boring, long-winded discussions that most people cannot follow because they are too complicated, but that are dead serious. These people need to be able to be better at statistics than the leading machine learning researchers. And at the moment, the AI ethics debate is the one where you don't have any barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Right, everybody who has a strong opinion and is able to signal that opinion in the right way.
Strong words from Joscha Bach.
And to me, that is a very frustrating thing because the field is so crucially important to our future.
It's so crucially important, But the only qualification you currently need is to be outraged by the.
Jeder Kacklappen mit einem Twitch-Account kann hier einfach eine Meinung haben zu AI Ethics. Das ist natürlich tatsächlich für jemanden wie Joscha Bach nicht zu ertragen. Ne?
Injustice in the world.
It's more complicated, right? Everybody seems to be outraged. But
Well,
let's just
I'm
say
not
that
so
the
much,
incentives are not always the right ones. So basically, I suspect that
Nein, Christopher
a lot of
Wiley?
people that enter
Nein.
this debate
Wiley?
don't have a vision for what society should be looking like in a way that is non-violent, where we preserve liberal democracy, where we make sure that we all get along and we are around in a few hundred years from now, preferably with a comfortable technological civilization around us.
I generally have a very foggy view of that world, but I tend to try to follow, and I think society should in some degree follow the gradient of love, increasing the amount of love in the world. And whenever I see different policies or algorithms or ideas that are not doing so, obviously that's the ones I kind of resist.
So the thing that terrifies me about this notion is I think that German fascism was driven by love. It was just a very selective love. It was a love that
Well,
basically...
now you're just manipulating. I mean, that's... you have to be very careful. You're talking to the wrong person in this way about love.
So let's talk about what love is. And I think that love is the discovery of shared purpose. It's the recognition of the sacred in the other. And this enables non-transactional interactions.
But the size of the other that you include needs to be maximized. So it's basically appreciation, like deep appreciation of the world around you, fully, like including the people that are very different than you, the people that disagree with you completely, including people
Also ich fand das mit dem Shared Purpose auf jeden Fall besser.
including living creatures outside of just people, including ideas, and it's like appreciation of the full mess of it. And also it has to do with like empathy, which is coupled with a lot.
Cambridge Analytica sagt mir was, ja. Gibt's ja auch nicht mehr, ne? Das Know-how hat sich in London halt verteilt auf andere Propagandabutzen. Aber Aggregate IQ sagt mir erstmal nichts, aber es klingt so wie eine interessante Metrik und ich kann mir schon ungefähr vorstellen, wozu das dient.
Lack of confidence and certainty of your own rightness. It's like a radical open-mindedness to the way forward.
I agree with every part of what you said. And now if you scale it up, what you recognize is that love is in some sense the service to next level agency, to the highest level agency that you can recognize. It could be, for instance, life on Earth or beyond that. You could say intelligent complexity in the universe that you try to maximize in a certain way. But when you think it through, it basically means a certain aesthetic. And there is not one possible aesthetic. There are many possible aesthetics. And once you project an aesthetic into the future, you can see that there
Operation
are some
Mockingbird bloß außerhalb.
defect from it, which are in conflict with it, that are corrupt, that are evil. Right? Yeah. You and me would probably agree that Hitler was evil because the aesthetic of the world that he wanted is in conflict with the aesthetic of the world that you and me have in mind.
Yeah.
And so the thing that he destroyed, we want to keep them in the world.
There's kind of ways to deal. I mean, Hitler's an easier case, but perhaps he wasn't so easy in the 30s, right? To understand who is Hitler and who is not.
No, it was just there was no consensus that the aesthetics that he had in mind were unacceptable.
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult. Love is complicated because you can't just be so open-minded that you let evil walk into the door, but you can't be so self-assured that you can always identify evil perfectly, because that's what leads to Nazi Germany. Having a certainty of what is and wasn't evil, like always drawing lines of good versus evil.
Yeah.
There seems to be there has to be a dance between like hard stances, like standing up against what is wrong, and at the same time empathy and open-mindedness towards not knowing
Wovon
what
redet
is
der Mann?
right and wrong, and like a dance between those.
I found that when I watched the Miyazaki movies, that there is nobody who captures my spirituality as well as he does. It's very interesting and just vicious. Right? There is something going on in his movies that is very interesting. So, for instance, Mononoke is discussing not only an answer to Disney's simplistic notion of Mowgli, the jungle boy who's raised by wolves, and as soon as he sees people, realizes that he's one of them, and the way in which the moral life in nature is simplified and romanticized and turned into kitsch. Right, it's disgusting in the Disney movie, and he answers to this. You see, he's replaced by Mononoke, this wolf girl who is raised by wolves and who is fierce and dangerous and who cannot be socialized because she cannot be tamed. Mm-hmm. It cannot be part of human society. And you see, human society, it's something that is very, very complicated. You see people extracting resources and destroying nature. But the purpose is not to be evil, but to be able to have a life that is free from, for instance, oppression and violence, and to curb death and disease. And you basically see this conflict which cannot be resolved in a certain way. You see this moment when nature is turned into a garden and it loses most of what it actually is, when humans no longer are submitting to life and death in nature. And to these questions, there is no easy answer. So he just turns it into something that is being observed as a journey that happens, and that happens with a certain degree of inevitability. And the nice thing about all his movies is there's a certain main character, and it's the same in all movies. It's this little girl that is basically Heidi, and I suspect that happened because when he did field work for working on the Heidi movies, back then the Heidi animations, before he did his own movies, he traveled to Switzerland and Southeastern Europe and the Adriatic and so on, and got an idea about a certain aesthetic and a certain way of life that informed his future thinking. And Heidi has a very interesting relationship to herself and to the world. There is nothing that she takes for herself. She is in a way fearless because she is committed to a service, to a greater whole. Basically, she is completely committed to serving God. And it's not an institutionalized God. It has nothing to do with the Roman Catholic Church or something like this. But in some sense, Heidi is an embodiment of the spirit of European Protestantism. Mm-hmm. It's this idea of a being that is completely perfect and pure. And it's not a feminist vision, because she is not a girl boss or something like this. She is the justification for the men in the audience to protect her, to build a civilization around her that makes her possible. Right? So she is not just the sacrifice of Jesus, who is innocent and therefore nailed to the cross. She is not being sacrificed. She is being protected by everybody around her who recognizes that she is sacred, and there are enough around her to see that. Right? So that's a very interesting perspective. There's a certain notion of innocence.
Nee, damit hat Lex
this notion
garantiert
of
nicht
innocence
gerechnet.
is not universal. It's not in all cultures. Right? Hitler wasn't innocent. His idea of Germany was not that there is an innocence that is being protected. There was a predator that was going to triumph.
Yeah.
And it's also something that is not at the core of every religion. There are many religions which don't care about innocence. They might care about increasing the status of something. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's a very interesting notion that is quite unique. And I'm not claiming it's the optimal one. It's just a particular kind of aesthetic, which I think makes Miyazaki into the most relevant Protestant philosopher today.
And you're saying in terms of all the ways that a society can operate, perhaps.
Ich habe noch nicht mal alle Filme von ihm gesehen, ne? Ich gucke die ja. Also der Plan ist eigentlich, sie alle mit meiner Tochter zu gucken, aber für die meisten ist sie noch zu jung. Ein paar sind auch ziemlich gruselig und so, aber ein paar gehen schon gut.
Perhaps the preservation of innocence might be one of the best.
No, it's just my aesthetic. So
your aesthetic.
It's a particular way in which I feel that I relate to the world that is natural to my own socialization.
Mein Nachbar
Maybe it's
Totoro
not an
habe ich gesehen und
that I have cultural roots in Europe.
Yeah.
Ponyo
in a
und
particular
so.
world.
Die einfachen Sachen.
So maybe it's a natural convergence point, and it's not something that you will find in all other times in history.
So I'd like to ask you about Solzhenitsyn, and our individual role as
Kikis
ants
kleiner
in
Laden
this
oder wie der
very
heißt.
large society. So he says that some version of the line between good and evil runs through the heart of every man. Do you think all of us are capable of good and evil? Like, what's our role in this play, in this game we're all playing? Is all of us capable to play any role? Like, is there an ultimate responsibility to, you mentioned maintaining innocence or whatever the highest ideal for a society you
Das
want?
wandelnde Schloss habe ich
Are
gesehen.
all of us capable of living up to that? And that's
Aber der
our
war schon eigentlich zu
responsibility.
abgefahren, denke ich. Mit dieser ganzen Weltkriegsstimmung da und so. Chihiros Reise kann ich mich gerade nicht erinnern, ob ich den schon gesehen habe.
Or is there significant limitations to what we're able to do in terms of good and evil?
So there is a certain way, if you're not feral, if you are committed to some kind of civilizational agency, a next level agent that you are serving, some kind of transcendent principle. In the eyes of that transcendental principle, you are able to discern good from evil. Otherwise, you cannot. Otherwise, you have just individual aesthetics.
Right.
The cat that is torturing a mouse is not evil because the cat does not envision, or not part of the world of the cat is envisioning a world where there is no violence and nobody is suffering.
Yeah.
Right? If you have an aesthetic where you want to protect innocence, then torturing somebody needlessly is evil. But only then.
No, but within, I guess the question is within the aesthetic, like within your sense of what is good and evil, are we still, it seems like.
Ja, es ging mir ganz ähnlich. Ich habe es mir dann erklären lassen von jemandem, der es sich voll drauf geschafft hat, aber ich habe trotzdem nur die Hälfte verstanden. Es hat auf jeden Fall was mit dem Zweiten Weltkrieg zu tun.
Like, we're still able to commit evil.
Yes. So basically, if you are committing to this next level agent, you are not necessarily are this next level agent, right? You are part of it. Mm-hmm. You have a relationship to it like a cell does to its organism, its hyperorganism. And it only exists to the degree that it's being implemented by you and others. And that means that you're not completely fully serving it. You have freedom in what you decide, whether you are acting on your impulses and local incentives, on your feral impulses, so to speak, or whether you're committing to it. And what you perceive then is a tension between what you would be doing with respect to the thing that you recognize as the sacred, if you do, and what you're actually doing. Mm-hmm. And this is the line between good and evil, right? Where you see, oh, I'm here acting on my local incentives or impulses, and here I'm acting on what I consider to be sacred. And there's a tension between those. And this is the line between good and evil that might run through your heart. And if you don't have that, if you don't have this relationship to a transcendental agent, you could call this relationship to the next level agent soul, right? It's not a thing. It's not an immortal thing that is intrinsically valuable. It's a certain kind of relationship that you project to understand what's happening. Somebody is serving this transcendental sacredness or they're not. If you don't have a soul, you cannot be evil. You're just a complex natural phenomenon.
So if you look at life, like starting today or starting tomorrow, when we leave here today, there's a bunch of trajectories that you can take through life. Mm-hmm. Maybe countless. Do you think some of these trajectories, in your own conception of yourself, some of those trajectories are the ideal life? A life that if you were to be the hero of your life story, you would want to be? Like, is there some Joscha Bach that you're striving to be? Like, this is the question I ask myself as an individual trying to make a better world in the best way that I can conceive of. What is my responsibility there? And how much am I responsible for the failure to do so? Because I'm lazy and incompetent too often in my own perception.
In my own worldview, I'm not very important. So it's I don't have place for me as a hero in my own world. I'm trying to do the best that I can, which is often not very good. And so.
Untamed Impaler. Ich denke auch, also wir haben ja, also ich fand den ersten Talk auf jeden Fall besser als den hier. Ich habe den dritten, der ist ja relativ aktuell, den habe ich auch einmal gesehen. Den fand ich eigentlich auch besser.
So it's not important for me to to have status or to be seen in a particular way. It's helpful if others can see me, or if a few people can see me that can be my friends.
No, sorry, I want to clarify. The hero, I didn't mean status or perception or some kind of marketing thing, but more in private, in the quiet of your own mind. Is there the kind of man you want to be? And would consider it a failure if you don't become that. That's what I meant by hero.
Yeah, not really. I don't perceive myself as having such an identity. And it's also sometimes frustrating. But it's basically a lack of having this notion of father that I need to be emulating.
It's interesting. I mean, it's the leaf floating down the river. I worry that
sometimes it's more like being the river.
Bah. Bah.
I'm just a fat frog sitting in a leaf on a dirty, muddy lake. I
Full of
wish I
love.
was waiting for a princess to kiss me. Or the other way. I forgot which way it goes. Somebody kisses somebody.
Jetzt kommt Mike Mellis als Thema. Das halte ich jetzt nicht mehr aus. Das machen wir beim nächsten Mal. So. Maddox. Ich mag den auch. Der ist einfach... ich weiß auch nicht, ja. Er interviewt ständig Anarchokapitalisten und ist total der Blödmann eigentlich, aber ich mag ihn trotzdem. Ja. Maddox, du wolltest wissen, wie ich Oppenheimer finde. Ich fand Oppenheimer super. Ganz im Gegenteil zu Interstellar. Interstellar ist mein absoluter Hassfilm.